So now I will pass things over to our guest speakers, Steve and Joe, to introduce themselves and start the session. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to HeadSpace. We all approach work in our own way, everybody, and we're with our own unique viewpoints, perspectives, thoughts. But how do we develop those viewpoints, and how did we develop those perspectives and our different values as it comes to work? In this presentation, Steve Anderson and myself, Joe Ogmundson of Reach Trauma Consultants, will attempt to introduce the idea of HeadSpace in the hopes that you'll be at least a little bit more aware of what approach you bring to your work every day, and maybe even why. Here's a brief overview of what we hope to cover today, and we'll do some introductions in just a moment. Who we are and what we are is going to be right away. There might be some concerns regarding the content of the information that we're going to be providing, and we'll cover some of that. The idea is your life is as a story. We're going to look at the foundations of our thinking and being as it relates to work, our own story and our definition of what we conceive of as headspace. Some little bit of thoughts about anxiety and attachment as it relates to the workplace. And we bring what we have to everything that we do, and some final thoughts about that, and maybe even some time for questions. But first, we want to recognize and thank our First Nations.
So I'm coming to you today, everybody, from the Malahat First Nation, which is Vancouver Island, the southern tip of Vancouver Island, and the Sartlip Nation, which it would be the Southern Gulf Islands. So I'm actually talking to you from one of the Southern Gulf Islands off of the coast of Vancouver.
And this presentation also comes from the territory of the Kakite First Nation, with territory in what is now known as New Westminster. The New Westminster Indian Band Kakite First Nation is recognized by all levels of government, as well as the Assembly First Nations, where they hold delegate status. The Kakite First Nation historically spoke the downriver dialect of Halkomelem, a Coast Salish language, and the Kakite First Nations is one of the smallest First Nations in Canada and the only one registered without a land base. Steve.
Hi, so everybody, I'm Steve, and my background is education. I was a teacher for 29 years, retired last year, and was also a carpenter contractor, so I'm a builder, and was also involved in manufacturing. So I've got a fairly well-rounded outlook on kind of the things that you might be interested in. My last 16 years of education was in psychology, which was just a blast. So I'm bringing a psych lens to what we're talking about today.
And I come from a family of 10. 3 of my 4 brothers have careers in tech and engineering, so naturally I became a teacher, a social worker, and a counselor. I'm a partner at Reach Trauma Consultants, and one of our main goals is mental health education. We want to teach our clients so they don't need us anymore, which is, I guess, when you look at it, a pretty terrible business model. Our emails are available on screen there. We'll provide them for you again later.
Good.
Let's make it clear that some folks might find that some of the topics that we talk about might cause you to feel troubled, anxious, upset. Might trigger some kind of emotions, whatever. Send us information in the chat, or get a hold of us through email if you have some concerns that are raised through this. We're not suggesting that's going to happen. We just want you to be aware that it might happen. Steve.
Yeah, and that would be related to some of the things that we're going to discuss. Where part of our presentation today, or maybe even the key bits of it, are about going back in time and sort of digging into how we think and why we think the way we think. Sometimes going back into our own heads can be a little scary, and there might be some things that surprise us. So, back to what Joe said, if you feel triggered, that's a catchword, but if you feel triggered or something feels unsettling about what we've discussed, do touch base with us, please.
And we want to also point out that these experiences are probably affecting your workplace headspace right now. We can be reached at the emails provided or through our website, which I'm guessing some of you have Googled already. And so again, just a reiteration of what we've said. So to be a person is to have a story to tell. To be a person is to have a story to tell.
And stories bring you and I together. We not only exchange stories, but we're characters in each other's story. So if we go back to the previous quote, to be a person is to have a story. The way we can kind of get a handle on this fairly quickly is to think, have you ever been in a conversation with somebody who has absolutely nothing to say? Everything you try to bring up or discuss, it goes absolutely flat. It would be known as social quicksand. And how difficult is that? So this idea of having a story, being aware that all the components of your life leading up to now are bits and pieces of who you are. As soon as we begin to engage in conversation with each other, we now become characters in each other's life story. So as much as it might hurt you to have me say this, we are now a part of your life story because you're hearing what we're saying and we're discussing this. And as freaky as that is, relax, it's not that bad. That's just the way it goes. Every interaction we have writes itself into our minds, and it becomes part of our dialogue. So this idea, if our life is a story and an ever evolving story, one that begins at birth and ends with death, it would make some sense to try to understand, to some degree anyways, the process of how it is written and what are some of the possible ramifications inherent in the process of how it's written. A couple of things. We're going to go back and forth over this a little bit here. So a couple of things. I want to clarify one thing right off. Let's stop for a moment and consider that your brain, which is the engine room of the whole deal. Okay, so your brain is about, is there in the camera? It would fit into your hand like that, a little bit gushy. And everything that you are, everything that you sense, everything that you experience, all of it is recorded in this soft tissue, no moving parts, electrical, chemical piece of tissue, 3 pounds. So all the realities that are around you are coming out of this one piece of 3-pound organic mass. And that's something to ponder, that your reality is being written into moment by moment throughout your life. Go ahead, Joe.
And we're not going to get time to do all of the, there's not adequate time to cover all the background material that's needed here, but we just want to acknowledge and be aware that the nature side entails a genetic code passed on from parent to child, that you have no control over that. You are who you are. But we also have a nurturing side that influences from prenatal development right on. And so what we're going to say here is we're going to lean towards the idea of nurture as the part that we can understand and what parts of that can be attributed to the nurturing that we received. So
let's start with another little house cleaning bit here. How many of you out there have heard the phrase, it went in one ear and out the other? This idea of an audible stimulation goes in and it's gone. I want to clarify right now that did not happen. And if you think that happens to you, you're lying to yourself. All right. Every single thing that your brain takes in through your senses, all 5 of them, we won't talk about the 6th sense, although it was a good movie, that your brain logs it all. Whether or not you remember it, there's the issue. Okay. So all senses, every single stimulation you have, it goes into your mind and it's there. I want to get this idea of a metaphor of a house foundation. So some of you may be aware of this, but in most Western countries, actually most countries in the world, if you build a building, you put a foundation in the ground to hold it up. And the idea of a foundation being built properly and well is really, really important. Otherwise, anything that you build on top of it may be suspect to some degree of difficulty, depending on how high out of the ground you decided you wanted to go. So underneath the cement that you're looking here, there's what's called a footing, and it kind of spreads out a little bit wider down there. And theoretically, if this is the right foundation on the right ground, that foundation there should hold up just about anything you put above it that it's designed to hold. Joe, next slide. So the foundation that's under this house would be a smaller, less robust foundation than the one that would need to be underneath this. Okay, so when we look at the foundation going in, it's the first thing that goes in the ground when you're going to build something later. So foundation goes in first, and it's got to be done right, and it's got to be strong, and you can't muss around with the chemicals that are in it. It's got to be the right amount of cement, the right amount of sand, the right amount of gravel in order for it to hold together, you know, over time. So if we look at the picture on the right, my right screen being the apartment complex, if we considered each of those floors possibly to be a different stage of your life or years of your life as you go on, you would want to make sure that the foundation that's down is well established and is put in well. Anything or any shortcuts that you take in putting in the foundation may not show up on the first floor, maybe not even on the second floor, but you might end up having some issues on the third, fourth, fifth, and on up. Things could get really tragic if you tried to build on top of a bad foundation. We're going to swing this over to the idea of your story here in a moment. Next slide, Joe. So if the foundation is unattended, or if it's eroded at some point in time or over time, it will not appropriately service the addition of new floors over the years. And in fact, will deteriorate more quickly than a foundation that has been properly constructed. Let's connect this to personal development over a lifetime. If we're talking about life, your lifetime as being your story and each of the components and experiences that you have going into your story, that would then make you the author of your story. Okay, so you are the person that is writing into your story, although many times many people lose fact or forget that fact. Okay. Question then is, when do you become the writer of your own story? Go ahead, Joe. On this slide here, if we consider everybody, I'm assuming everybody sees this, if we look at birth at the beginning, and just for fun, let's say the point of the arrow, let's say that's 90 years. Let's say we're talking about a lifespan of from birth to 90 years. First thing you might want to know, I'm assuming your youth, is that in those 90 years, you're going to sleep for 32 years. Did you catch that? You're going to sleep for 32. So if this was a tape measure on the floor, I ask you to try this at home. Stretch it out to 90 inches. Take off 32 inches. That's what you got left. But maybe between 75, 80, 90 years old, maybe things aren't so clear and you're not so robust. So let's take those off as well. How much active, go get it, life have you got? All right, sobering thought. Okay, so if we talk about this idea of your story, then the question is, when do you start writing your story? Have you always written your story? And the fact is that probably you haven't. So when I talk to classrooms full of students over many, many years, and I ask them, these would be senior high and early college level students, I would say, when do you actually start to get to make your own decisions? Think about it for a moment, you guys that are out there. Okay, so when do you start to make your own decisions that might run contrary to parents or guardians' wishes? Usually comes back that it's around age 11. That has been my experience, and usually there's a consensus over the years that 11 is about when you can say, I don't want to go out with the family, I'd like to stay home. I'd like to do this, and you're trusted to go and do that. You start making your own decisions. Prior to that, you don't get to make a whole bunch of decisions. Most people. So this is a generalization, but it's not a gross generalization. Most people don't get to make those decisions till about age 11. That means up to about age 11, you're not making any decisions for yourself. The majority of them are being made by parent, caregiver, guardian, whatever that looks like. Might be an older sibling. Okay. So if by age, couple of months, weeks, months, up to the first year, second year, you can imagine that if you had some stuff that was not going well in your life at a critical period in your life, which is those early years, that's now in your foundation. So up to age 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 11, who is writing what into your life story, because that is the foundation that you have under the who you are today. Okay. Is there anything you can do about it? Can you change it? You can't go back and rewrite history, but you can go back and rewrite how you think about those things and or how you interpret those things. Well, when do you start being able to think about that kind of stuff? And the answer is it's probably around 15. Some kids a little earlier, some a little later. Sorry, boys, but for guys, probably around 25. That's just the way it is. So about 15 is when you could look at a situation that maybe occurred to you earlier on and have the brain capacity to sort through that, walk through it, and bring new meaning to it. This is not something you would tackle on your own. If it's something tragic or something deep, you would do it with somebody you really, really trust, somebody older, usually somebody more mature, maybe more wisdom. Or in our case, we see a lot of people professionally that want to go back and need to go back and revisit some of this stuff. So is everybody clear how the foundation of a building, if it's not working right, then anything you build on it after is just really not going to work quite as well? The same thing here. You know, you're all getting ready to head out and enter the workplace, maybe into some lifelong jobs. What are you taking out there into this new opportunity? But maybe even a little bit more important, what is everybody else out there bringing to work every day, and how are you going to negotiate that? Go ahead, Joe.
So the fact is, you have not written your whole story. There's a good period of time which your story is written, good or not so good, for you by someone else or a whole bunch of other people, where they've kind of made decisions for you and they've told you about who you were. One of our favorite things to do with the family of 10 that I had was we would ask mom or dad to tell us what we were like when we were little. We had no idea, but we had to rely on them to tell us stories that made us all laugh and share that shared experience. Even though we were there, we don't remember it. We had others tell us. It's similar to that.
Your life story then is something that you bring with you every place you go. All right. And that creates a headspace from which you're viewing sort of the world around you. Everything is according to your perspective. Think of times when maybe you got it wrong. And that's usually the best place to start. When did you look at something and based on your background, your knowledge, your library of history, you made an assessment and it wasn't quite the right one. You know, you didn't have enough information. There were some shortfalls and some gaps in your bridging that didn't work quite right. Okay, so the story that creates a headspace then that we're talking about here is something that you can take out there and refer to and use as a reference point for everything that you do. Every story is unique. Simple question: how many of you share fingerprints? Hopefully you didn't have to think about that long, right? Everybody is absolutely different, and there's lots of similarities in different people, but there's more different than the same. I could say to Joe in any given situation, you know, Joe, I know exactly how you feel, and in fact that would be wrong. My approach would be, Joe, I think I might know how you feel. Or I think I might know how I might feel if I was in that situation. But I can't say I know exactly how you feel because it changes with the biology, and given every one of us is different, then everyone's interpretation is going to be different. Sometimes slightly, sometimes a lot. So back to that timeline then, every experience that you have early on is going to be reflected in how you interpret what's going on around you. There might be some of you out there have, Joe's going to touch this in a bit, attachment related issues or trust related issues. If you are somebody from birth to, let's say age 11 that has been programmed to not trust people because people have been non-trustworthy, people have lied to you and cheated you, et cetera, et cetera. How trusting are you going to be when you get out there? in the workplace. Or if you come across somebody that you think should trust you, but they're not, well, what's their story? You know, where are they coming from? And it just takes time. Go ahead, Joe.
So the question is, who's written what into your life, and when did they do that? And everybody has a perspective. Everybody could be at the same event and have a different viewpoint of what it was, but you're bringing it with you everywhere you go. And could it be that some of us might need to revisit our storyline, our timeline, in an effort to sort out some or all of the why do we do the things the way we do it? Why do we always approach job applications the same way? Why do we always approach project work the same way? Why do we always approach our colleagues in a certain way? Why do we do these things? Not everybody does it the way you do it. Not that the way you're doing it is good or bad, it just is.
Hold that slide for a sec, Joe. You know, also related to that, you know, if we were talking about some big bad nasty event in your life, and let's be real, they're out there. Some horrific things have happened to children and continue. You know, the idea that somebody should revisit some of these things, some of these idiosyncrasies that maybe we have, and we wonder, why do I do that? Why do I react like that? Why? You might be full of whys. And the reason that you need to review something like that with somebody who is qualified, certainly qualified if you think it's something nasty, is that the choice is, do you leave it alone? Well, I don't think about it. It's not bothering me now. Yes, but remember what we said at the beginning, that it's in your head and it doesn't go somewhere. It doesn't, you know, evaporate out of your mind. It's there. It's in a file folder somewhere in this vast library you've got, and it will remain there. But if it's something that's bothersome to you, there's a certain amount of your subconscious is trying to keep you from that. So if we thought that it was in a drawer, you know, a file drawer full of nasties, part of your subconscious is keeping that closed, but it can't always be like that. So the idea of being able to revisit something when you're a little bit older and you have the brain capacity and the thought capacity and the maturity to go back in some of this stuff in a safe way, bring new meaning to it, then you can refile it in a better way. And then instead of those events possibly being on top of you, you get to be on top of them. And that's an important differentiation.
Steve, could you set up this clip for us?
So this is a short interview by Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry. Bruce Perry is one of America's leading child trauma psychologists. And I'm not going to go ad nauseum into what he's done. He's a writer of very good books. And one that I would recommend if you've got a pencil is the book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. I think that everybody that's a human and can read should read that book. It just brings a perspective to life. It's a series of trauma cases that talks about the resiliency of children and the ensuing effects of early childhood trauma and what exactly constitutes trauma. So it's worth looking at. Oprah, you know. This is only 1 minute. We're going to play it twice. Pay attention to what Dr. Perry has to say.
What we will do is we will send this clip by email to everybody that's in attendance. How does that sound? Can I send that to you later, Haley, and we'll make sure everybody gets a chance to see it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Maybe Steve, you could just describe quickly what Oprah and Dr. Perry are related to.
This is a segment where Oprah is interviewing Dr. Perry. They actually have co-written a book called Born for Love, another great read relating psychological trauma and variations of trauma and or life's experiences for children. What the key here in 1 minute, it's a YouTube clip. It's Oprah and Perry, 59 seconds. So you can go find it, watch it a couple of times, share it around. What he says is that a child who is raised in a chaotic household, experiences trauma in so many different ways. So sometimes we think trauma has to be, an arm ripped off, you know what I mean? Like, it's got to be nasty, nasty. You would be surprised at the list of things that constitute trauma, certainly in the life of a child. So if a small child is raised in a house where, let's say, there's alcoholism or alcoholics or mental illness in a parent, or violence or yelling or screaming or shouting, you know, let's say AC/DC is playing all day long. I'm not knocking AC/DC, all right? But anyways, or Pavarotti, I guess, for that matter, right? It is going to have an influence on the child. It's going to have an influence on the child. There is no way that a child will not absorb that stuff, going back to this idea that everything that goes into your mind is there for the rest of your life. It's going to have an influence. So a child that is raised in the perfect home, you know, whatever that looks like, but the perfect home is going to be wired differently at a brain base than the child who is raised in a home of chaos. And how many different levels of chaos are there? Well, I mean, how many stars are in the sky? Okay. So this goes back to the early years being a foundation of who you are today. And so there is going to be some of you that are out there dialed into this, that may have some things that you might want to go back and just think about. Just think about them. And maybe there's some new light that might come to some of those things. Okay. And that's it. But anyways, I want to get the point across that if you're a child or a young adult, a person of a disrupted life early on, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that you are wired differently, on top of the fact that you're wired differently, you know, genetically. Okay. So the question then is not what's the matter with you? You know, what's the matter with you? You know, what are you yelling for? What's the matter with you? The question is, hey, like, what happened to you? What happened? The paradigm shift is significant there. Okay. That's good.
Sound not coming?
Go ahead, Joe.
So what is HeadSpace and how does it apply here? Let's define HeadSpace as your point of view. Let's define HeadSpace as the thing that drives your goals. HeadSpace is your motivator. HeadSpace is your collection of interests. HeadSpace are all the things that you need. HeadSpace are all the things that you want. HeadSpace is the way you handle conflict. HeadSpace is the way you handle rejection or approval, and so on and so on. In short, HeadSpace is kind of like that sense of being. You bring it with you everywhere you go, and it filters everything you see and do. As Maslow said, if we wish to help humans become more fully human, we must realize not only that they try to realize themselves, but they are also reluctant or afraid or unable to do so. Like, a lot of times we really don't want to take a good hard look at what we've done. In fact, one of the reasons why we don't apply for certain jobs is we're afraid of the rejection. One of the reasons we don't apply for certain promotions is we feel this imposter kind of sense that says we're really not the one who ought to be running things around here. Or the reason we don't look for more money or raises in our job is we don't value it the same way that we think maybe we should. We bring that headspace with you in everything we do and every interaction that we have at the workspace and everywhere else. So I want you to think about your point of view, your value, your vision on the world, and how does that affect your job applications? Or how does that affect the way in which you think that's a job I could do, or will I settle for that job because I know I can do it? Or do I want to challenge myself for something else? Every one of those are valid approaches to job applications, but which one is the one that you are going to be, developing, and which is the one that's going to be the most useful and helpful to you? How does your current workplace affect your headspace? And what headspace do you bring into your current workplace? Do you show up and have you got a certain mood or approach that you take to your colleagues and interactions with the people around you? So what goes on there with your other colleagues? Are there some colleagues that you treat differently than others? Are there some colleagues you seek out for doing project work with? Are there others you reject and you don't want anything to do with? Are there other colleagues that you sabotage? Like, are there things that are going on with your colleagues that are being affected by the headspace that you're bringing to that?
Hold that one, Joe, for one sec.
Sure.
Your interactions with your colleagues. I can remember a situation where somebody was really owly on the job site one day, and abnormally nasty. And somebody, one of the coworkers, looked at the individual and used a couple of expletives, to them and said, what the freak's the matter with you? You're back over your dog this morning. And in fact, the guy had backed over his dog backing out of the driveway that morning and killed it. And he still came to work. So nobody thought. This goes back to what happened to you. Now, what's the matter with you? So he's angry. We can all see that, or he's distant. But a little bit of a pre-read in emotions ahead of time would have saved a whole meltdown later.
So your shift in headspace then goes from what is wrong with you to how did you get like this? So your reactions with clients are also the same. Are there people that you would just try to avoid because it's difficult to work with those clients? Even though it might be lucrative to work with those clients, we try and avoid them? Or do we seek out other clients that we know we can, get along with, but may not be as beneficial to your company or whatever, or to your personal goals? Again, your interactions with clients, they're all also bringing a headspace, and they're viewing you through that lens. What are your interactions with the administrators that you work with, and some of your managers or superiors or your quote bosses? What are your interactions with those folks? And also, what are the headspace that they bring to you? Not to mention that you're going to take all of this and go home, or not to mention you're going to take all of this and go with you to be with your friends. So your headspace is going to be a factor in all of those interactions that you have. So just take a moment, reflect on that while we move ahead. Any thoughts on that, Steve, before I jump in?
Yeah, I always laugh at this slide.
Yeah.
Your interactions with administrators, you guys that are out there, I'm not sure what your age brackets are. Joe and I are in our 60s. And so, I've been boss and manager and entrepreneur and then educator. And if you walk in every day to your job and with the attitude that everybody you're working for is, can I say dickhead on this? Is that illegal? Anyways, everybody's a total butthead. They don't know dick from not, like, do you know what I mean? If you walk in every day and you're just like, these people are so stupid. How's your work week gonna go? How's your month gonna go? When do you come out of that space, right? As opposed to, well, something might have happened to them, and they've got their own reasons for being the way they are, and I wasn't there, and I don't know what it is, but that's not really my business. My business is I got to do this, and just kind of hunker down and get her done and do your thing. The difference is like night and day in your own mind. So you go home at the end of the day absolutely wore out with an ulcer because you've been worrying about a whole bunch of stuff that shouldn't even be in your wheelhouse, or you write off a bunch of stuff that it's none of your business, and really how does it affect me anyways, and it's only for today, or it's just for this moment. There's ways to rewire your brain to get around that stuff. Yeah. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So anxiety and attachment, hey? I think you were going to say that, Joe, but I did already, so don't bother.
Go jump in.
How much you're bringing to work? Go to the next one. The bear. We're going to talk about the bear here in a minute. It's a bit of an anecdote. Go ahead, Joe. So there's a discussion in this whole idea of anxiety and stress related issues in the workplace. I mean, everywhere, but we're talking about workspace, and what that does to you physiologically. Okay, and so the idea that if you're go back to that timeline in your mind there, the early years, if you're a child that's in a chaotic life where you just can't really ever relax because you might get hit, yelled at, sworn at, maybe worse, and so on and so forth. And and it is unrelenting. That is not good. That's when the bear comes home every night. Okay, so that'd be a violent parent, or a parent that's inflicting pain on a child, let's say. Okay, that's different than when you're walking through the bush and there's a growl comes, and you see that it's a bear, and you end up with your heightened, boom, your endocrine system kicks in and your adrenaline jacks up, and there's just so many things that come on stream like that. Let's go to the next one for a minute. I want to walk through this one here. Okay, keep going, Joe. Let's go to the diagram, and then I'll refer to these things in a minute. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So your endocrine system is the brain's system for kicking into gear all these things that will save your life. So if we look at this little diagram here on the left-hand side, if you think of that moment of adrenaline rush, like when you're rocking in your chair and you almost tip over, or somebody freaks you out and jumps around a corner. I'm assuming everybody here's had that moment where heart in throat. Okay, what happens? The brain kicks all these things into gear. So first thing is pupils dilate. Do you know why? Think about it. Okay, so that you can see more. The pupils dilate to take in more information. So you're freezing up, and your brain becomes hyper aware. Eyes dilate, pupils dilate. You can see everything, and you just take in more information. Heart rate comes up very, very quickly. Why? Well, because you might need to run. Stomach. Who's been like really jacked and uptight and upset or freaked out and felt sick, right? So stomach stops digesting food. Okay, pancreas kicks out glucose and sugar, which gives you energy in case you're going to run. Adrenal gland, same thing, epinephrine, neoepinephrine, to give you energy to glow, or to take off and run. And of course, then we've got the issue of the relaxed bladder. And if any of you are in that category, I'm sorry, but anyways, you know what that would look like. On the flip side of this thing, we've got the time when all of a sudden the issue is over, the bear is gone. Okay, so the threat has subsided. Now your pupils contract, heart rate comes back down, and stomach, usually, for those of you that are out there, you may have been through here, sometimes people just go and puke. Like, the stomach, the brain goes like, I forget what was in there, but whatever it is, let's eject it, and we'll reload later. So it gets that out of there, stimulates the gallbladder, and everything kind of goes back to where it's supposed to be. For those of you that have had a real serious rush, likely you haven't wanted to eat right away. Likely you probably wanted to sleep. Most people would say that what they want to just want to lay down, is want to go to sleep. The body just really wants to recharge. Okay. Now, the reason we've got this up here is when you're affected by anxiety and fear and stress on a continual basis, your body, left side of that diagram, okay, you can't stay there. And for people out there who go, I can take stress and I can deal with it for a long time. No, you can't. You might be doing that, but to the detriment of everything else. All right, you cannot stay there. So if you're in a job that's really, really stressful, or you enter into a job that's really stressful, maybe one that brings you to tears or frustration or anger, hey, that's not the place for you. Not unless you get some help to deal with that. That's not the place for you. Well, I need the money, and we're stuck. There's a million excuses. But on the body effect side of this, what's your ill health worth? How much money is going to make up for the fact that by living on the jacked side of this thing, you're decreasing your years of life? Seriously, right? This stuff, we haven't got time to go into this, but the information is all there. It's all factual. It's beyond refute. Okay, so you can't live here. And so as you are looking for a job, or if you're in a job that may put you into that situation, that's okay occasionally, but that's not okay all the time. You don't want to walk into that job every day to the point where you're walking out at night, you're absolutely exhausted, and you go back the next morning and you start to increase and wind up in the stress and anxiety even before you get to work. No, 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 not good. So as you're out there looking for work, those you're going to get into the workforce, you want to put that on the scale of measurement. You want to know whether you really want to do that, because unfortunately now we've told you about it, so you can't deny it. All right. Remember this thing about us writing into your story? Now you know a fact, and you want to be careful about that. Okay. So,
And on that note, reflection on the idea that there might be times when you are the bear in the eyes of somebody else.
yeah.
And so, you're writing their story. And so there's that whole meta kind of way of looking at this, where maybe it could be there are some times, if we reflect, that we're actually creating anxiety, or we're creating some kind of response in other people, intentional or otherwise. It's worth reflecting on.
And Joe, I was going to say that we work with a number of contracts where we work with staffs where this is the situation. That there are people in the workforce who bring stress with them every single day, and they are stressing the entire staff out. So you might have one person in an office of 8, 9, 10, and everybody hates coming to work. And they hate coming to work because of the one person, is not dealing with something that they really need to deal with, or they haven't sorted out that maybe that's not the right job placement for them. So this is something really, really important. If you come across a situation or are in a situation where there is a lot of stress, you need to open dialogue on that. You need to come to somebody, be it management, and if it is management, then get somebody to go with you. If you're in a situation where maybe you got a shop steward or something, or you need to say, hey, this is affecting me in this way. And there is a huge growing awareness in the need for balanced mental health in the workforce now. So shutting up about it and just sort of, bearing it, don't do it. You're too important. You're too valuable.
Related to all of this also is the issue of attachment, because not only sometimes can our workplace drive up our stress and anxiety, but our workplace can also be a place where, or at least our work situation can be a place where we develop attachments or rejection, which is just the other side of the same coin. So any kind of an emotional tie with another person is shown by seeking closeness to that person and showing distress on separation. So one of the things that keeps us from leaving a job that's maybe not as good as the one we could go to might be the fact that we feel really, really attached to the people at the job that we're in right now. And so, being able to be aware of all of this can really, really help us make decisions that are good quality decisions, that are based on what's really good for you and what everything about you, as opposed to what's just the most comfortable. Because sometimes it's got to get worse before it gets better. We got to go through that. We got to make that pass through. And so our body contact, familiarity, responsiveness, all of our attachments comes again from the nurturing side of our upbringing, and we learn how to develop emotional ties with other people. We learn how to develop closeness, and we learn what's safe. And that's we carry that with us as well into the workplace.
Yeah, a little added note to that, Joe, related to attachment. Those of you that are, fluent in YouTube, take a look at Harry Harlow's early experiments on attachment with rhesus monkeys. Let me tell you ahead of time, you're not going to like it. It's just original footage, which is why it's still up there. There are some of the experiments actually there. And they found that rhesus monkeys, when they were taken away from their mothers at an early age, like newborn baby monkeys is what I'm trying to say, and they were put in a cage with what they called the wire mothers, 2 artificial mothers. One was just a wire cage with 2 eyes on it and a baby bottle with food. And on the other side of a little wall was one that was carpeted with a light in it, so it was nice and warm. And in every case, the baby monkey would only go over to the wire mother for food for less than an hour a day, and spent the rest of the day hanging on the warm, comfortable wire or carpeted mother monkey. In many of these cases, baby monkeys died from no attachment. The findings are exactly the same with infant children. firsthand experience with some of the work that we do, where infant children with no attachment at all, no touch, no contact at all. So that means you go in, you could change a diaper or not, feed a child or not, but not touch the child. You are going to have real severe reactions to that. Attachment is critical, absolutely critical to a well-developed child and a well-developed person.
So let's connect what we just heard. Steve?
Yeah. So anxiety and the endocrine system. So we're just going to do a sort of a flash review here for a moment, and then we'll open up a few new things at the end. So is everybody clear on this idea of anxiety and what it does, what the brain does to your body when you're dialing up? Okay, so it's not just when a wild animal's coming after you. It can be when the boss, walks into the office and he's looking at you, all of a sudden, that might be the situation. You might be ducking and running for cover. But other people may be doing that with you too. So that's important to understand, that that's a brain-based system of protection for you. Living in a state of anxiety all the time, not good at all. So prolonged exposure, bad. You cannot do it for a long period of time. Certainly not without bringing some professional care to the situation. Potentially having somebody coach you up a little bit on maybe how to deal with it, how to categorize some of it, how to come to some conclusions on some things. Okay. The other piece, which you have not heard Perry say, but we encourage you to watch that video clip a couple of times. I mean, best 2 minutes you'll spend in your life, I think, that Perry said that the differences between the way a child is raised is responsible for the child one from the next being different from each other. Not wrong, different, not bad, different. Okay.
The habits that we have
also here related to, like you guys, I apologize for all this. It's so much stuff. This is a year's psych course. What don't you teach to you guys in less than an hour, right? There is a thing called explanatory style. Very interesting when I first came across this. Dr. Martin Seligman was the president of the American Association for a long time, also the dean of the Penn State Department of Psychiatry for a long time. He coined the study on this idea of explanatory style. So explanatory style is the habits we have for explaining the events in our own lives. I have my own explanatory style as to how I explain what happens to me. So if I'm having a bad day, I got a series of reasons in my mind that tell me why I had a bad day. Joe's got his own, Haley's got her own, and you all have your own. Okay, so it's how we interpret bad events that occur in our lives, and again, how we incorporate the good events in our lives. By the way, let me just jam this one through. How are we doing for time?
We're down to about 3 minutes.
Oh, okay, real fast. 3 key places that it's related to optimism, pessimism, by the way. Also, there's some stuff on YouTube about this. But optimism or pessimism, you all understand optimism, pessimism, glass half full, glass half empty. The idea of where does pessimism come from in a child? And there's, according to Seligman's studies, there's three ways, primary ways. One is a child learns pessimism at the mother's breast. That doesn't mean the child's nursing and they drink it. It means that it's here. It's in the eye of the parent or the mother and the baby. And if baby looks up and doesn't see smiles, but sees frowns and concern, baby's going to have frowns and concern, and that's going to be the nature of the child. That's one. Second one is experiences with adults that we learn to trust in our early years, pre-7, 8 and down. So if we have an adult that says, you're no good, you'll never be any good, you're so stupid, why are you so stupid, etc., that would have a fairly significant effect. If you tried that on somebody quite a bit older, they'd go, oh, you're having a bad day, what a dip, or something like that. But a small child doesn't do that. A smaller child would just go, I'm no good. there's that one. And then the third area where pessimism might come on to somebody would be if somebody suffered a significant loss pre-12 years old. Somebody passes away, goes away, they never come back. Okay, anyways, more on that. If you want to ask questions, ask them. Is that me again?
Yep.
At any given stage in our life, you are an accumulation of your memories, and memories are the records of your life. Okay, and they are added moment by moment, beginning the day that you're born. There's no getting around that. It is what it is. So you can accept it or not, but that doesn't change it. That is a fact. Every sensory input is logged in your brain. You just may not be aware of a whole bunch of them. By the way, scientifically, just for you that like this stuff, a moment has actually been measured, and a moment is 3 seconds. I'll be there in a moment. Are you there yet? Okay, so when you use well, guys, be careful. When you tell her that you'll be there in a moment, don't say that. You know, be there in a couple of minutes or soon. Try soon. So a moment is 3 seconds. All right, and think of the moments that you don't even remember. Don't dwell on that. It's kind of depressing. So our story, your story, my story, to be a person is to have a story to tell. And the best way to be on top of that is to take some time considering your story. Where are you at?
So if we all have the story, who's written it? If we all have a story, what if your story is not a good one? What are you going to do about that? What factors might influence your story? Just reflect on some of those maybe. And how does this impact on your headspace at work? So if we have about 2 minutes, let's have a look and see if there's anything in the chat. Shall we do that?
Good.
Yeah, we have one question here. We were wondering what the second book you mentioned. We know that you mentioned The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, but there was another title you mentioned, Steve. Could you share what that was again?
That one is Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah, and it's Born for Love. It has some anecdotes in it as well.
Great, thank you. One more question in the chat here. What happens when a premature child is placed in the NICU at birth? Will they also experience attachment issues later on, or does a lack of touch a little later, maybe 5 years old, start attachment issues?
Okay, now I'm not a doctor on that one, but I have studied a lot of this stuff and taught a lot of it. So if a child is in ICU, it is fairly mandatory now, or what am I saying? Mandatory. Doctors and nurses and staff will try to get the parents in to do touch on the baby while it's in, say, an incubator, if it's a preemie. So the understanding that it's really important that the baby be hearing the sounds of the parents' voices and have some touch, that is fairly common according to some prenatal and what am I trying to say here? Nurses that we know and doctors that we know that are in that field. Can you make up for it later? That's a really intriguing one. If you are interested, though, whoever was asked that question, the human mind goes through what's called critical periods in the life of your development. And some of them you can think about. There would be the critical period of walking, talking, crawling would be one. Like there's a certain period of time where the brain is primed for that specific thing to take place. So if you did not open the brain up to stimulation in that specific thing, you might miss a critical period. And a very interesting story on that for whoever was asked that is called, it's called Genie, Secret of the Wild Child. I believe it's on YouTube. It's a documentary, a true story. Very interesting about a young girl who was isolated from birth to about 11 in LA. She was discovered in 72. And there was a lot of research on that girl. She never did acquire language. And there was just a lot of stuff that never did come on stream because she missed a whole bunch of critical periods. So that's worth watching.
Great, thank you.
Oh,
One more
I
question.
got one more thing to add to that. Sorry, hold it one second.
Go ahead.
The other thing related to the attachment or touch is one of the stories in Dr. Perry's book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Child. One of the stories is about a young fella who was a teenager that was prescribed a dose of touch therapy, whereby as a teenager, he was hugged by like in a clinical setting, sort of rocked and hugged by a grandma who was very good at this. And it met this hole in his brain, this area of stimulation that had never taken place, managed to sort of redress some of that. It's a great story.
Thanks for sharing that. One question here, is it best to unpack past negative emotions or just plan positive changes and move forward?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, go, Joe.
That's an excellent question. I think that came from Roma. To be brief on that, Roma, I think again, if you look back at the intention of this entire presentation, everybody comes to a situation in their own way. And I think you wouldn't want to say blanket, everybody should unpack their negative past, or everybody should not unpack their negative past. I think that's where, if there's something negative that you sense upon reflection that it's blocking you or preventing you from moving forward or creating the kind of change that you want to be or see, then that's the time to get help with some others and find somebody that can help you, that person do that in concert with some kind of therapeutic experience. But always planning positive changes in the moving forward. I guess once again, we have to define what positive means, but I think we can assume that we're meaning things that are beneficial to oneself and others. Then why would you not want to do that anyway? So the first part, there's two parts to that question. The first one is, it really is going to be dependent upon the individual and what those negative things might be. And it's difficult to do some of them without some kind of therapeutic intervention. But the other is very much, why not plan positive going forward? So great question.
Yeah. Hey, Roma, Joe, can I just add this? Roma, if you had something, let's say a negative experience in your past that brought you to tears, let's say on a fairly regular basis, I'm just picking an example. You might want to get some help with that, rather than something that just makes you sort of angry or gruff or something like that. If it's something, as Joe said, that is really kind of tilting your wheel a little bit and causing you a little bit of grief, then sometimes having somebody who's professional and usually completely neutral, you don't know them, so you can speak freely. What sometimes they can do is help you kind of open that drawer where that negative emotion is hiding. And maybe it just needs to be put in a different drawer. I'm just giving you that picture, right? Maybe it shouldn't be over here where it keeps triggering you. Maybe if you, with some help, took it and put it over in a different place, no more trigger. And sometimes counseling can work that fast, depending on the individuals.
We're over time.
Thank you both. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and we're a little bit over time, so we will wrap this up. I can stick around if anybody else has any questions, but feel free to head out if you're over time. Roma just says such great information. Thank you both so much for all this valuable insight, and I agree. Thank you both for joining us and sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody here has some great takeaways from this.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Oh,
yes, absolutely. So I'll say goodbye now, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Haley.
Take good care.
Thanks.